We look forward to hearing from all of the presenters, and my Vice Chair, Tammy Witherspoon, would you like to make any comments?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to welcome everyone to the meeting today. We know housing affects our everyday lives, you know, whether it's apartment, where we renting or where we buying. We all are affected by it. I'm looking forward to see what our presenters have for us today so we can go forth and better our citizens in Mississippi. Thank you, Madam Chair.
With that being said, we'll have Scott Spivey, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Home Corporation. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for having me today. Thank you, Madam Chair, both for having me and for your service on our Legislative Oversight Committee at the Mississippi Home Corporation. I appreciate it. What I've brought today, this presentation, we call it our roadmap. The Mississippi Home Corporation has grown in the 20 some odd years I've been there from just administering a handful of programs to administering just everywhere in the income spectrum, from very low income all the way up to market rate mortgage products. And so what I've got today is kind of the first page, if you open your package, kind of moves slightly through that. Let me get you. Thank you. And so I would love for you guys to just jump in with questions as I kind of move through what the programs are and the features. We're trying, and please stop me if I start speaking in code. There's a lot of alphabet soup that goes with all these programs, a lot of acronyms. So if there's something that's not clear, please go ahead and jump in.
And if you do have a question as he goes, we can do that as opposed to waiting to the end.
So on the first page, you see programs by income range, and it's listed by AMI ranges. Most of our programs are federal. They're based on area median income. The area median income in the state is $56,000 as average. And so it's going to be, for the purposes of our broad discussion today, it's going to be percentages of that $56,000 number. You can see the programs that deal with the income ranges below 30%, which is considered very low income, are the housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, creating housing options in communities for everyone, the Emergency Solutions Grant, and the Housing Trust Fund. 3 of those are federal programs. The CHOICE program, creating housing options in communities for everyone, is a state-funded program, and this body allocates those dollars to the Home Corporation for administration. Next step up in income range.
Is that the teachers program?
That is not housing assistance for teachers. No,
Okay.
this, but we're going to get to it in just a second.
Sorry.
Because they're
At or below 60% of area median income is the home rental program and the housing tax credit program. The next step up is home down payment assistance, and I'll get into the difference between those two. Homeowner rehabilitation and the Habitat loan purchase program. At 120% of area median income is the Mississippi Affordable Housing Development Fund. And then at or below 140% is our construction loan fund, housing assistance for teachers, the mortgage credit certificate, and the mortgage revenue bond program. And then at or below 170% is what we consider kind of our market rate mortgage product, which is the Smart Solution program. And so if everybody will turn the page, we'll get into housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, or HOPWA. important number, which is our annual allocation.
Senator Witherspoon has a question.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
on your programs, how are you all getting the word out? A lot of my constituents, you know, they don't know what's out there. You know, what are you all doing to spread the word and to make sure, you know, that these funds are getting where they need it and that people can apply for these different types of programs?
Well, you know, the answer to that is it depends. So we do have an advertising budget for a lot of our programs that are available to like the general public, like our mortgage programs. There's an advertising budget that comes along with that. A lot of these other programs, like HOPWA and a lot of the very low income, a lot of the grant programs we administer, the people who apply for that are nonprofit agencies around the state. And so they get the word out to the areas, because these are all competitive grants, right? These are all, especially a lot of the programs we're going to talk about at the lower income ranges. These are federal grants that come from HUD. Until 2015, a lot of them were administered by MDA, and then they were moved over to the Mississippi Home Corporation because they're housing related, and we're the housing finance agency. And so they were moved over, and so it depends on the agencies, right? Who are actually administering the dollars. We're kind of a pass-through. We get them from the federal government, and then there's a competitive application process. And so, for example, if you know, Mississippi Catholic Charities or, you know, nonprofits around the state get a grant award, they'll reach out to their constituencies for applications.
And the local cities and counties apply for those grants as well?
It depends on the grant. Again, I'm sorry to say it depends. Some cities and counties are eligible to apply for assistance, especially with homeowner rehabilitation, for example. HUD likes to see units of local government included on that, and some are strictly for nonprofits. So again, it depends on the program. You're welcome. And so just getting started with HOPWA, this is a supportive housing. It is for folks that are living with HIV and AIDS to improve health outcomes for them. The funding source, again, like I said, is from HUD. The beneficiaries are persons who have been diagnosed HIV, AIDS, who cannot afford housing. It offers rental assistance and supportive services or eligible uses, and the delivery method is through nonprofit organizations. In 2019, we had 398 families who were assisted with HOPWA. The HOPWA grant, typically, it's based on our population, is about $1.6 million for the state, for the entire balance of the state. The next program is a little bit different. This is creating housing options in communities for everyone. We call it CHOICE. This is supportive housing for people with serious mental illness. This is, and I know that a lot of you have heard about the Olmstead decision out of Georgia and helping people with serious mental illness find housing in their communities so that they are not forced to be institutionalized. The Department of Justice filed suit against the state of Mississippi in order to motivate the state to kind of help people who are institutionalized but don't have to be come into the community. And this is a program we're administering on behalf of the state. Let me see, the choice is about $1.4 million annually. And what it is temporary rental assistance. So what we work through continuum of care agencies. So when the hospitals have someone who's going to be discharged, the continuum of care notifies us, and we help find an apartment and then pay that rent on that person's behalf. Senator Boyd, you look like you have a question.
I do. I want to ask a couple of questions about this.
Please.
So do we also work through our community mental health centers or departments of mental health?
We do.
Okay, and do they apply for funding from y'all to help set up these community centers? I mean, these community housing opportunities, or is it, kind of tell me how that works a little bit.
Yeah, so this is going to be tenant-based.
Okay.
And so they help with the applications on behalf of the tenant. This isn't going through necessarily through nonprofits, but we're working through Continuum of Care, DMH, and mental health centers. And I'm sure you guys know, We see a lot of activity in this program in the major metro areas where you have kind of a higher concentration of folks who, A, have serious mental illness, and B, inability to pay rent. The rural areas, we don't see as much activity, but it's open to statewide. This goes kind of hand in glove with some of our other initiatives that are on the production side. We try to motivate developers to set aside certain units when they're building apartments, low-income apartments for folks. We try to make them set aside units for people with serious mental illness so that if they get an applicant who qualifies, they go to the top of the waiting list if there's nothing eligible. And then we monitor that compliance annually and kind of, that's how we make sure they're doing what they promised us they would do in order to get their awards of tax credits, for example.
And you said that this is the only program that is state financed?
Not the only one, but this is primary, right. This is 100% state financed.
100%.
Some of our construction loan funds are a blending of MDA and Mississippi Home Corporation. One of our construction loans are some bond debt that the state issued that's since been retired, but it revolves. So those programs essentially use state funds, but this is the only one that is 100% state funded.
And you say it's $1.4 million?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long has this been in existence, and has the money remained the same?
It wavers a little bit. It's been around $1 million, just better than $1 million. It just depends on the budgeting process. Every year, it's been in existence, I want to say 4 years. And you can see we've been able to help right now, at the last count, 158 folks around the state who would not otherwise be able to pay rent, who have serious mental illness. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, not to get in the weeds, but I'm kind of curious about this, just from some constituent phone calls. So,
Sure.
Not problems, just opportunities. So, how long can they stay with the state and get this rental assistance? Are they time limited? Is there a typical period?
It's time limited, and I apologize, I can't remember whether it's 12 or 24 months of assistance, but it is time limited. The idea being, if they can be removed from an institution, chances are they can find work, especially if we can find them a unit, whether it's through a public housing authority or whether it's through tax credit units that have limited rents. They can find work, and I'm trying not to be too paternalistic about this, but they can find work that they can do and they can get income. And that's essentially what Olmsted wanted, right? Was they said, if you don't require day-to-day care, you should be able to live in your community, you should be able to work in your community, you should be able to pay rent you can afford. And that's what this program provides, a temporary assistance for them to get on their feet, find their job, get settled. The other benefit, especially with people with serious mental illness, is, and the same goes for housing opportunity for persons with AIDS, address is very important when you're talking about people that are high touch for medical care. They have to have an address where they can be reached, where they can, a lot of times counselors, doctors need to be able to reach out to them. Hey, are you taking your medicine? Do you need refills? Do you need help? And so these tend to be, simultaneously at the lower end of the income spectrum, but also the highest touch and highest risk clients that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
From the way you're describing it, it sounds like there's a lot of wraparound services almost that are involved when you see these different clients. Are y'all providing that? Is the Department of Mental Health providing that?
Usually it is the community mental health organizations that are providing it. And what we try to do, especially when we're motivating developers to set aside units, is try to do that handshake. So we work closely with the continuum of care folks, the community mental health agencies, and make sure that the property managers and property owners are in touch and know who to call, for example. I mean, that's the first thing they ask for is a phone number. If somebody has an episode, who do we call? Because what you don't want to do is call the police. It shouldn't necessarily be a police matter. Who do we call? And so those are the community health organizations and a lot of the case reps. That's where they come from.
It sounds like, too, the way that this is being done, you would see a lot of successful transitions to going to more of a permanent solution and helping these clients that are maybe having a crisis at that moment?
We're actually working on that right now as part of our marketing material. I know that you guys know that the state is actually still in negotiations with the Department of Justice. We're working out to get some success stories. You know, there's various HIPAA requirements. They have to be completely voluntary if they want to share their story. But our marketing group is working on reaching out to folks so that we can get some success stories if folks want to share that information, because it is private, but to be able to share those good outcomes.
Are you meeting all of the needs that the community mental health centers or the mental health department are asking of you in terms of, is there a waiting list for this kind of housing or temporary assistance, or is it just
So
taken care of?
there's a couple of different answers. So on the one hand, no. There's the need outweighs the demand for almost every program I'm going to present for you today. And that's just a fact of being in one of the poorest states in the country, and housing being central to everybody's well-being. As far as the problem that we're having right now that we're working out is when people are moved out of a hospital, where are the open units? And can, especially smaller developments, afford to just keep units open for 3 to 6 months where they're not collecting any rent? And so lining that up delays the delivery a little bit. And so we don't have a long waiting list, but we know that there is demand.
Thank you.
Moving on is the Emergency Solutions Grant. This is a HUD-funded program designed to assist people who are in immediate danger of homelessness. The audience, the delivery method is through nonprofit organizations who apply. Anybody who is currently homeless, that includes street homeless, or is in immediate danger of becoming homeless qualifies for this. We can do outreach, fund shelters, rapid rehousing, which often involves hotel stays or finding an immediate apartment in the geographic area, and related wraparound services that come with that. So this is a versatile tool in our toolbox that HUD provides. Typically, the state receives about $2.3 million in emergency solutions grant. We find that a lot of our nonprofit partners have gone through all of their funds by the end of the year. These funds because they're so versatile, they tend to go very quickly. One of the things that the committee should know is that this year, as part of the CARES Act, Mississippi received 2 additional allocations of emergency solutions grant funds for people that have been affected by COVID. And so if you keep in mind, $2.3 million is what the state gets annually, just based on population. We received $8.1 million and $10.4 million in 2 different rounds of emergency solutions grant funds. And those are currently on the street right now with a program that's not part of our regular, but it's rental assistance program for Mississippi. It's RAMP, that we're providing rental assistance using those, my alphabet soup, emergency solutions grant, ESG, CV 1 and 2. But the caveat there is it has to be related to coronavirus. So in order to use the CARES Act funds, it has to be directly related to the pandemic. It's not just anybody who's street homeless or who's in danger of becoming homeless.
So it's a total of $18.6 million?
Yes, ma'am.
And of that $18.6 million, how much has been utilized?
I know $2 million has been committed. The last check we got, we had a 40% increase in approval. And I don't want to I never want to complain. But one of the difficulties is this program is for people who are in immediate danger of becoming homeless. The CDC put a moratorium on evictions that if you can claim it, goes through the end of the year. HUD does not consider those people to be in danger of homelessness even though they haven't been paying their rent because they have to be sheltered under the CDC requirement. So I can't use those dollars to help those people and pay their rent because they're not actually getting kicked out and having their locks changed. The good news is these funds do not expire like the coronavirus relief funds, so they will carry over to next year. And I think the state has 24 months to spend it. So even though uptick is slow, because they have to fit a very small box and it's not as broad as we'd like it to be, the income requirement here is at or below 30%. So a lot of people that do qualify who were working still don't qualify for it. We will be able to use these next year. This doesn't evaporate like the coronavirus relief fund dollars do.
And this came directly to the Mississippi Home Corps from
Through
HUD?
HUD. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask one more question
Yes,
in
please.
regards to that? So to qualify, they have to have been affected by coronavirus, but so it can't just be a downturn in the economy that laid someone off. It has to have a more direct connection.
That counts. So if they can get a letter from their employer a lot of times, or, because they'll say, well, we had to close the restaurant, for example, or the hotel wasn't, so everybody got laid off. That's a direct effect, right? So those folks would qualify.
All right, ahead, Senator Norwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Out of the 18.6, Jackson entitlement, they get their money direct, or they get their money through?
Jackson gets their money directly. But this also covers the city of Jackson. So we are taking applications for this from, and I'm not familiar with how the city of Jackson decided to spend their coronavirus relief fund, or not, their CARES Act ESG. They got a separate pot of money that came directly to them as an entitlement community, but the way we're running it is statewide.
You have,
Solly, will you speak into the mic? Thanks.
you still have, what is it, mute?
Yes, yes, sir.
Now-
Mute and so Mississippians United to End Homelessness and there's an area someone on the Gulf Coast that's also running it, and we were also running it with Voice of Calvary.
Okay, I guess my concern, and I'm sure you saw what happened on TV the other day regarding Ridgeland, law enforcement dropping a homeless individual off in Jackson.
I did see that.
Is that a mute issue that mute could?
I think
And they have
it would
resources
be. The way we're running so if we're just talking about regular emergency solutions grant, that does go to some shelter care, and, to help fund shelters around the state. The coronavirus, the CARES funds are going directly for rental assistance and rapid rehousing, but yes, certainly.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so the coronavirus money can be utilized throughout the state for anyone who is in danger of becoming homeless, provided they are, it's related to this pandemic.
Got it.
Okay.
And I apologize. There's so many ins and outs of all these programs, but yes, please keep the questions coming to clear it up.
That's what we're trying to learn.
Right.
And this money that, the 18.6 million, is that being distributed through the nonprofits, or is it through?
There's two. So Mute is handling it, and and then I still can't remember the one on the Gulf Coast that's not covering. And then there's so there's three actually, because there's also one in the city of Jackson. So those are the three partners we chose for the rental assistance program. The other funds is a competitive application statewide. That's just on our average day, but the 18 is for rental assistance because of the pandemic.
So are those nonprofits the one that's advertising to?
That's correct.
Across the state that this money is available?
Now, on the ramp funds, no. We're actually advertising that. We've got web-based advertising going out. We're going to take a uniform application online for rental assistance. That's kind of special circumstances, right, due to the pandemic. But typically, again, like moving away from the CARES Act funding, yes, those nonprofits are the ones who are going to look for the clients who can utilize the services funded with the grant.
And is there a time limit on how long someone can get assistance from this 18.6 million?
Under the Emergency Solutions Grant, we budget for 6 months up front, but if funding is available and need can still be demonstrated to HUD, assistance can be continued.
Thank you.
So again, that's a little bit more flexible.
If we have a constituent, we're not in Jackson or the Gulf Coast, who do they apply to?
Mute.
Mute, okay.
One other question. Individuals I see that has been incarcerated, they can apply for all of the grants, or I see it specific said for the emergency solution grant. So they can apply for all of them?
Yes. The next program we have is really a production-related program. This is the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund was created using profits from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at the federal level, and then they're distributed to the states on a per capita basis. Mississippi qualifies for the minimum amount, which is $3 million. It's meant to help folks that are at or below 30% of the area median income, and it's administered through HUD. Really what this ends up being, for all intents and purposes, because of the way HUD wrote the rules, is gap financing for developers who are charging rents for folks at or below 30%. So what you're really talking about is rehab of usually public housing, rehabilitation. There's always going to be some gaps there between what different funding sources like the low-income housing tax credit or different grant funds. So this comes in the form of a grant for those developments, and then we monitor those units for income requirements in pieces of $750,000 at a time. We see it paired a lot with the non-competitive tax credit all around the state.
When you say the preservation of rental units, so they can apply for, if they're trying to rehab a rental unit?
That's exactly what it's for. So for example, the Yazoo City Housing Authority recently rolled up all of their deals, and when I say deals, I mean their properties that were monitored by the Housing Authority into one big rehab, and they used Housing Trust Fund dollars to help gap fill, because a lot of those tenants are going to meet that 30% or less area median income requirement. So a lot of it's preservation of existing affordable housing. Because HUD doesn't really have a rehab program, nor does rural development. So the low-income housing tax credit is really one of the only things going as far as large-scale rehab. And then the Housing Trust Fund kind of sits in that capital stack to help fund it. Moving out and into 60% or less area median income is home rental. Home is all in caps because it's the Home Investment Partnership. And I'm going to touch on this in subsequent slides or pages. We use home for 3 different purposes here in Mississippi. We get about $10.2 million annually based on our population. We use it for construction of rental property, rehab of rental. We use it for homeowner rehab, which is a little bit different rule set. And we also use it to fund down payment assistance. So when you're with home, again, when you're dealing with rental, folks have to be at or below 60% of the area median income. When you're dealing with home ownership, that can go up to 80%. And so what you get is the homeowner rehab and the down payment assistance can serve a higher income band, but for the purpose of adding money into development deals for rental, residents have to be at or below 60% of the area median income.
Scott, I know all of this is based on population, and based on population, we don't necessarily get a lot of monies. Is there any, do they look at any other factors?
Unfortunately, no. It's pretty much, they don't look at demand, they don't look at poverty rate, they don't look at, historical significance, anything like that. It's strictly, it's a numbers game based on population. The next slide, and it's only at the top, it's, the irony is it's only one piece, but this is one of the largest programs we run statewide, and it's one of the most important programs to affordable housing around the country. For the past 30 years, it's the most successful production program for affordable housing nationwide. It's the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. Mississippi receives just over $8 million in federal tax credits that developers are awarded. The demand for the tax credit exceeds supply at a rate of about 4 to 1. It's a highly competitive process. The IRS puts certain rules in place. The Mississippi Home Corporation is the administrator, develops a qualified allocation plan. We submit that to the governor for his final approval. Once he signs it, that sets the rules for the program for as long as that QAP is in effect. They typically are 1 or 2 year documents, and that sets up, all the rules, like what we want to see as a matter of policy from rehabilitation and new construction of affordable housing statewide. This has been, the tax credit was created in '86. It's been one of the programs that the Home Corporation has been administering for years. We have a lot of great developer partnerships, and it is, applying for the low-income housing tax credit is a full contact sport. They are very competitive. Because it is lucrative, but it also provides the largest bit of financing for rehabilitation deals and for new construction of rent-restricted units statewide.
Mississippi Home Corp is the one that provides this. So what criteria do you all utilize?
So, that's a big question. For example, the IRS mandates that 10% of your annual allocation of tax credits has to be set aside for nonprofit applicants. Right now, the current QAP that's in development, we divide it up into 4 groups. We divide it up into you have your mandatory nonprofit. We have a small development set aside, so people who are asking for less than the maximum of 750,000 credits. To do deals that are 36 units and below, because and I'll give you the reasoning behind that. What we found was those smaller deals don't win a competitive round if they have to compete against the guys that are making 80, 100, 120 units. But every single town and hamlet in Mississippi has an old HUD or RD deal that is 12, 24, 36 units that is in need of repair. And so we set aside 25% of our credits for small developments so that they don't have to compete with those larger deals. We have seen 100% utilization of that set aside since we implemented it 4 years ago. The remainder of the credits used to go into just what we call statewide. And that's where, if you want to apply, if you think you can score, feel free. One of the problems we were having, though, is the tax credit serves 2 purposes. It is the largest factor in your ability to rehabilitate existing units, but it's also the only game going to build new units that are affordable. And those are really apples and oranges. And so going forward, what we're going to do is we're going to say 2/3 of it is going to rehab. Mississippi is not necessarily growing a lot in population, but we do have a lot of low-income residents. If we build new construction in a town where people are living in older housing that is in need of rehab, they're going to leave it and they're going to go to the new construction. Well, what happens to that old structure? Now you've got blight. Now you've got a problem. So rather than doing that, we're going to do a rehab, and then we'll set aside 1/3 of the credits for new construction because we do have areas that are growing. We've seen a lot of development, especially in our college towns lately. Oxford, Starkville, Hattiesburg, because as those towns grow, you've got a lot of service industry workers coming to town. A lot more restaurants are opening, a lot more hotels are opening. A lot of those low-wage earners qualify for tax credit housing, and the stock is not on the ground. And so we want to be able to meet that need too. And so we're trying to meet competing needs as fairly as possible. And basically, we found the best way to do that is just split up the pie. Questions on that one? Senator Boyd.
Just in a college town where affordable housing is definitely a high priority among everyone, do y'all kind of reevaluate that number depending on response and applications and stuff like that, whether it's a 2/3 or a 1/3, or is that, do y'all look at that?
We look at it annually. So
Okay.
the QAP is redeveloped annually. And like I said, supply is never enough to meet the demand. One of the pieces of federal legislation that we've been working on, the last time we got a firm increase in tax credits was 2000. And then we got a temporary increase about 5 years ago that was a temporary bump for 4 years, and then it's going to go back down. We're still fighting for that because, we're not the only ones. It is literally every state in the country needs more housing tax credits. And I know there's been a lot of development in Oxford, recently, and, Oxford's actually done a particularly good job of working with developers who are developing in the cities, because local government and municipalities still have a lot of input on what they want it to look like. And we want that. We try to stay out of it, but there are certain things that we require of developers, certain amenities and services, because that's the other important thing. The future of affordable housing is not structures, it's services. It is after-school care, it is job training, it is budgeting, it is parenting. And so providing those services, we tell developers, we'll give you more points on your application if you promise to provide those services. And then the Home Corporation has an entire compliance division that holds them to their promises, for the subsequent 15 to 30 years. The next program on our list is the Home Down Payment Assistance Program. This is going to provide down payment assistance in the form of a grant. The amount hasn't been fixed yet. We're currently working with HUD on that to provide. When we were working with HUD on that grant agreement, we got some feedback. There was an old down payment assistance program that we ran. We had some lenders that said we would like to see that back, and so we've put that back into circulation.
How do you, is the home down payment, is that based on income, based on the,
As long as it's 80% or less area median income, they qualify.
and what, well, and the amount is based upon the purchase price?
We're working on that right now. We've done it both ways. We've done it as a fixed amount, and we've done it in the past. We've done it as a fixed amount, and we've done it as a percentage. Like I said, we're currently working with HUD right now to determine how we're going to administer that.
And this is throughout the state?
Yes, this will be statewide.
Do you have anything that shows, what goes to the Delta, what goes to the Gulf Coast, Central Mississippi, North?
I can generate it. Those are maps I can get, but I don't have them here. The next program is homeowner rehabilitation. This is where your cities and counties apply. They get a list of usually elderly families that live in their city or county, folks whose homes have just fallen into disrepair. This program is important to us because we think that preserving home ownership in Mississippi is valuable. We have one of the highest home ownership rates in the country. And that's one of the few things that Mississippi can really crow about. Helping low-income Mississippians keep what they own rather than saying, well, your house is, kind of crummy, you should just sell the land and move into an apartment. That doesn't help. That doesn't build multi-generational wealth. So homeowner rehab is something that we're kind of dedicated to as far as helping folks. And, again, demand exceeds supply. We see more cities and counties applying than we have funds available.
How much money in this program?
This is all part of that $10 million. It usually ends up being about 2.5. You know, and then as far as per unit, we really try to push people to do rehab as much as they can, but sometimes it's so far gone it ends up being a tear down rebuild. The Habitat Loan Purchase Program is something that we've been administering since the 90s. Oh,
One
sorry.
second.
I'm sorry, let me go back and ask one question on the homeowner rehab program. What other criteria, in addition to the 80% of the household income? I mean, do you use a ranking system to determine who qualifies and who should receive the services versus, other applicants?
It's part of the application process that and I don't know the application by heart, but yeah, they are scored. A lot of the score is based on past performance. So people who get a grant award and sit on it and don't move the money tend to score not as well as people who get on it and move quickly. That's just a function of these funds expire. And sometimes you'll have folks that you get an application and, they get an award and then they just, they don't move on it. They don't get, they don't hire the contractor. They don't start moving on it. And that tends to, hurt their chances on the next round.
I see in the information the local governments are the actual delivery method. So I guess my question is, the residents of any community could apply to their county for these funds, and then would it be the county board of supervisors that would make the determination among the applicants, or the program itself chooses the recipients?
No, the local unit of government chooses the applicants, the properties that they're applying. So we get, part of their application is a list of these 10, say, families have approached us, their homes are dilapidated, in need of repair. We're going to apply for this grant fund to help these 10 folks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The Habitat Loan Purchase Program, this is where Habitat affiliates around the state, once they build a house, we'll actually buy that mortgage from Habitat to give the affiliates the money to start working on new ones. We do that at no cost to the Habitat affiliates. We still think that, that's a good model. We've got a balance of about $8 million that we've loaned out to Habitat so far statewide. And affiliates that want to participate just fill out an application with us and submit some financial information.
And do you know how many homes they do on it? Is this $8 million a year?
No, this is the balance of loans that we're servicing right now. It's not
Okay.
$8 million a year. No, goodness gracious.
I don't know, how much is it per year?
What's that?
How much is it per year?
Well, it's a revolving loan fund.
Okay.
Right, and so right now it has a balance of $8 million. It's based, funding is based on, corporate contributions from the home corporation. Right now there are funds available, so there's no need right now to infuse more money into the program. The Mississippi Affordable Housing Development Program is one of the ones that I was telling you guys that is another one of our state programs. This is really, we're trying to attract and encourage builders and developers to construct or rehab housing. So this is a production program for licensed contractors. It's short-term, low-interest rate fixed loans, construction loans that we use all around the state. We've seen fewer applications in this program recently as interest rates have just dropped. It's hard for us to stay competitive that way, but when interest rates do, eventually they will have to go back up. We'll see more utilization of this. A lot of times we'll get builders and developers. They tend to be smaller shops that don't have traditional banking relationships that come to us in search of funds. And our construction loan fund is similar, and it's a production program, and it's funded in partnership between Mississippi Development Authority and the Mississippi Home Corporation. Same customer base, smaller developers who want to build single-family houses for, moderate income Mississippians who don't have the traditional banking relationships. And one of the things that we've learned recently in taking some applications is that as banks are tightening up their underwriting standards, we have a little bit more flexibility. And one of the problems that we see is on the homeownership side, you have an inventory problem. And that's nationwide, that's not just Mississippi. Nobody is building in the affordable space, right? 120 to 180, $190,000 homes that are new, that's just not happening anywhere. Builders, especially since 08 and 09 and the Great Recession, tend to go for the bigger ones. Home builders were especially hard hit with that economic downturn, and so they tend to go for the larger custom homes. Nobody's providing new inventory at the affordable level for first-time home buyers. And so this program has an opportunity, as banks tend to tighten their underwriting standards, for us to really meet a need that's there. And so you'll probably be hearing a lot more about that, especially conversations that I've had with our board of directors and some of our applicants. We'll probably be advertising this a lot harder in the coming months. Housing assistance for teachers. This is a $6,000 grant for teachers who agree to teach for 3 years in a critical teacher shortage area. We recently brought this up for renewal in January, and it passed. We'll be back again this coming January because we got a 1-year extension. It's a great program. It can be stacked with other forms of down payment assistance to really help teachers buy homes in the areas that they're going to teach. Yes?
And I can't remember if this came up in the hearing or somebody mentioned it. What's our default rate in that program?
I will have to go back and look, but it's minimal. It is not, it's not very much.
It's very small.
Right,
Okay.
right. And so, and really, when you talk about default rate, it's a grant that goes in on the front end. So really what you're talking about is if they don't renew their contract and they move, the Mississippi Department of Education can recapture that grant fund from the sale of the property. So it's not like a loan where it's defaulted on. It's really, okay, from the sale of this property, there's a lien filed against it. Now you may be in second or third position, and if the loan does go bad, the bank's going to get first position and usually eat up everything. But there is a recapture provision where those grant funds can come back and be put back into the pool. Yeah, I think there was a little bit of confusion because there's also a teacher loan program, and I think those two kind of got crossed when we talked about it.
This one is funded by the state.
This is, yes, ma'am. Yes.
Is there any kind of waiting list for this program?
We have expended all of our dollars for this year, the last time I checked. And this is actually a line item in MDE's budget. So it's not completely separate, but MDE determines how they want to fund it. And then because we're the housing folks, they kind of asked us to run it for them, and we agreed. So yeah, and on the next page, you can see since 1999, when it was created, there's been $2.3 million in grants spent at $6,000 a pop. The mortgage credit certificate is a dollar-for-dollar reduction in your federal tax liability if you're a first-time home buyer. And I know that's a lot. What it boils down to is at the maximum amount of $2,000 a year in relief, you can change your withholding and take home an additional $166 a month. Or, and the idea being you get an extra $166 a month in purchasing power to pay your mortgage, and the underwriters at the banks can use that as income qualification to qualify you for your mortgage. It is limited to folks that are at or below 120% of the area median income. It cannot be partnered with the program I'm going to talk about next, which is the Mortgage Revenue Bond Program, because they're both funded using the state's private activity bond cap. And so it tends to partner with our market rate product, the Smart Solution Mortgage. But it's a good option for folks who want to change their withholding. And then actually there's the other benefit, because it works for the life of the mortgage, is that, say they get a promotion or they bring home more money, they don't have to change their withholding. They can just increase their tax refund at the end of the year by $2,000, which is not bad. The Mortgage Revenue Bond Program, MRB7, we call it MRB7 because we changed the way we do down payment assistance. We changed it. This is for first-time home buyers at or below 120% of the area median income statewide, and provides $7,000 in down payment assistance up front. One of the things, we used to do 3%, then we did 3.5%. We changed it to $7,000. One of the ancillary benefits of changing it to a fixed amount, in addition to not being confusing to borrowers, is that we have seen an uptick in program utilization in rural areas, because $7,000 is a higher percentage of the purchase price in rural areas than it is in metro areas. So your dollar goes a little bit further. So we're actually, one of the things that ended up happening, which we hoped would happen, and we've seen that bear out, is we've seen program utilization. So you see more homes being purchased by first-time home buyers in rural areas of the state. This is one of the flagship programs we've been running since our inception. Most housing finance agencies, this is the core of their mission, is increasing first-time home buyers. We tend to issue between $120 and $160 million in bonds with the Home Corporation to fund this program. Right now we're tracking at about $3 million to $4 million in loan origination every week. And then the last program on our list is our Smart Solution program. This is a market rate program. While interest rates are very low, this essentially functions the way most bank lending does. Rates are, we call it our TBA program because the rates are to be announced, whereas the Mortgage Revenue Bond Program, the mortgage rates are directly tied to the bond rate. This is set daily at what we can sell those mortgages for in the secondary market. This can be combined with the mortgage credit certificate. We keep it low interest. And what the idea behind us getting into this sector was, a lot of people, especially with professional degrees who graduate, are already over income. Thinking specifically about nurses, are already over income for the Mortgage Revenue Bond Program, but they still have needs as far as purchasing their first home and getting into their first home. And then last but not least, kind of the back page, blight elimination is over. That was a temporary program that we ran. Homebuyer education is something that we run constantly. Continue to receive grants from HUD for homebuyer education that we use through local counseling agencies. We require homebuyer education on all of our mortgage products. That's a one-day class that folks can take, but we feel that it does have a benefit on the way folks understand their mortgages. They understand their responsibilities. They understand their rights as they go into that long-term financial relationship with their mortgage servicer. Yes.
On the blight elimination, you say the funding source is the U.S. Treasury. What kind of money is in this program?
So blight elimination is over. But what that was
over, is that?
Yeah, yes,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. Yeah, blight elimination, we ended up using about $15 million to eliminate blight around the state. The hardest hit fund that was established just after the Great Recession for mortgage assistance for people who became unemployed or underemployed through no fault of their own. Especially in larger cities like Detroit, what they found was that it created a lot of blight. They were able to exert some political pressure and get blight elimination as a qualified use of those funds, which wasn't really thought about ahead of time. As Mississippi received a couple subsequent allocations of hardest hit fund dollars, we thought we might as well throw a blight elimination program out there and see how that works. It worked well in some areas. Because of the way Treasury wrote the rules, it was very paperwork intensive. But we were able to do some great things, especially in some, city of Drew, city of Shaw, places like that, where it was, tear down, rebuild. There was a specific plan in place to tear down houses, rebuild it, and then they had a homeowner willing to go in. Mayor Flaggs in Vicksburg was very proud that they were the first one to tear something down. So yeah, it was statewide. But those funds were used for blight elimination, and then we also restarted our mortgage assistance program in the wake of the coronavirus and got a lot of applications, and so those funds got used up pretty quickly. And I think the final couple of pages are just kind of some of our fiduciary responsibilities as far as compliance monitoring with tax credits. That's a relationship. When people receive tax credits, their relationship with the home corporation is 15 to 30 years. Monitoring for physical inspections, doing file audits to make sure that qualified people are living in the units. And then, there's a list kind of on the back page of all the different audits and reviews that the home corporation goes through on an almost annual basis. There's a lot of there are lots of agencies that we work with. And at this point, that ends my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions about, housing concerns, housing policy, what the future looks like.
Any other questions from committee members? I have a couple of questions, if no one else. Okay, has your interest rate has decreased based upon it's what 0% in terms of national, with the Feds keeping loans down?
Right. So when it's whatever we can issue the bonds at, and then we fold in the 7%. The 7% is part of the bond structure, and then cost to operate it. So it has gone down commensurate with the decrease in interest rates. So yes, absolutely.
And how will your portfolio be affected by this pandemic? I was reading last night that nationally, a lot of the lenders, they're expecting over the next 12 to 18 months that we may be going back to this lending crisis as we had in 2008.
We talked to our mortgage servicing partners, and we did not have a lot of requests for forbearance in our portfolio. Now, and I talk to my counterparts in other states all the time. Alabama did have some. They saw some. We were surprised by the low number. So default rates have not drastically gone up under the Mortgage Revenue Bond Program. And I think a lot of that is due to the unfortunate fact that a lot of the people affected directly by the pandemic tend to be renters. Whereas we had a mortgage crisis 10 years ago that affected people who owned their homes, this crisis tends to affect low-income renters first, which is why we have rental assistance as a priority. Now that's not to say that no homeowners are affected. When the governor announced us reopening mortgage assistance, we got like hundreds of calls within the next 48 hours. And we were able to help people. We're still working through that pipeline of applications. But it has not drastically affected. And that's kind of counterintuitively, like I was saying when we were talking about the Mortgage Revenue Bond Program, people are still borrowing. People are, if you talk to lenders, you talk to realtors, people are out there because the interest rate's just too good to pass up, right? Like if we're mid to low threes with $7,000 coming with it. If you're just going to the bank, with good credit, you can get sub 3. That's free money. I mean, some people remember double-digit interest rates, which is like credit card rates right now.
Last question. Okay, you talked about that, what's set aside for the mentally ill. Chairwoman Witherspoon asked you about those who have been previously incarcerated. What about those kids that are coming out of the foster care system? Because I know monies can be utilized for them, but we don't have a program, do we?
That is not, so kids aging out of foster care is a concern. That's something that we're looking at building into some of our grant programs. We're looking at models that other states have used. We have this, as a housing finance agency, we have this great kind of fraternity of all the other HFAs around the country that we work together. So we're actively looking at how to implement a program and how to fund it for that. So that's in process.
Thank you so much. Senator Norwood.
Deborah, I have just two questions. Do you have a listing of the, I don't know if you call them grantees or sub-grantees, that you have the 18.6 million, who you have given money to?
For the Coronavirus Relief Fund Emergency Solutions Grant?
Well, I guess, I was looking at more or less, especially in terms of grant funds, all of the programs that you administer. Do you
All
have?
posted on our website.
Right. Could we get a listing of those?
Sure.
And the second question is, I guess it was last year or maybe a couple years ago, where Mississippi was cited as being one of the states where African Americans were less likely to be able to qualify for funding, monies for loans to purchase homes. Have you all addressed that in any form through funds that you receive?
So right now, and I want to be sure that I'm absolutely accurate, but I think we have some of the demographic data under the Mortgage Revenue Bond Program. So 54% head of household, average borrower age of 34% to minority households is the current inventory right now. Other states are implementing programs that we're keeping an eye on right now. I know my counterpart in Wisconsin has doubled the minority borrowing rate under their Mortgage Revenue Bond Program, and that's he's a good friend of mine that we're talking to about that. There's also a lot of changes that would have to be made on qualifying products, right? So the underwriting standards, the bondholders want us to hold certain standards for the qualifying mortgage. So we use, Fannie, Freddie, FHA, rural development, VA are kind of the underwriting standards that they're happy with. One of the biggest barriers to minority home ownership, especially first-time home buying, is credit. We can take care of the money part with a down payment assistance loan, but it's going to be dealing with alternative forms of credit and income qualifying that'll end up moving that needle.
Do you have any programs that address that? Because I know,
Not
do
currently.
not?
That's something
Okay.
we're looking at right now.
And there was a proposal on the table that would reduce the mortgage insurance premium to, I believe it was like 0.5, and I think now it's like and that was rescinded, which mean the difference between an individual qualifying to purchase a home and not qualifying to purchase a home based on that.
Right.
Have you all looked at any innovative ways that the Home Corps, or that you may be able to supplement or support minorities qualifying for money, a bank of mortgage financing, or some of the other programs that may be through the state? Have you looked at ways that resources that you have that may be able to provide a better opportunity for minorities to qualify for a home buyer?
Buying down the mortgage insurance premium is something that we have looked at and that we continue to look at. That does end up being expensive, and it raises the total cost of borrowing necessarily, right? I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. So whether you build it into your bond issue and you pay a higher interest rate, which affects affordability long-term, which is kind of the focus right now, is you keep the rate as low as possible, provide upfront money, and then keep the rate down because you want long-term affordability. It's a 30-year relationship, right? Even though they tend to last 7 to 10 years. But that is something that we're constantly keeping an eye on. It is an area of concern.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Shanta Crockett with the Center for Social Entrepreneurship.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shantae Crockett. No, you're fine. I'm with the Center for Social Entrepreneurship. CSE is a 4-year-old 501c3 nonprofit based out of West Jackson. We target a 43-block area known as the I-Village. Now, that's a name that we made that up for us. But the I-Village boundaries include Capitol Street, Prentice Street, the JSU Parkway, and Rose Street. And all of the streets that's in between those boundaries is who we target and who we serve. CSE's mission is to help I-Villagers eliminate blight, harness talent, grow businesses, and engage civically. We have 4 pillars that we stand on. That's education, economic development, community engagement, and housing. In our 4 years, we've done some amazing things. In our education realm, we've done a girls' coding camp for third grade through 5th grade. We have a youth entrepreneur club for 4th and 5th graders. We have a Lego robotics team for 5th graders. We have the I-Village after-school program. Of course, that was at Barr Elementary School. That school has since closed, and our kids now go to Pecan Park. However, because of the pandemic, our kids are studying from home. In 2021, we're hoping to break ground on a state-of-the-art Bill and Lillian Cooley Youth Entrepreneurship and Tech Center. We want to house that on the Vilo Lake properties. That property is a city-owned property on the corner of Capitol Street, Rose, Grand, and Armandale. That entire city block, we're hoping for a 10,000 to 15,000 square foot building.
Hallelujah.
In economic development, last year we helped 5 women start businesses with the help from a grant from the Foundation for the Mid-South. And currently, right now, we're working on a grant. We got a planning grant from the Kellogg Foundation where we're going to assist multi-generational families increase their wealth through workforce development and entrepreneurship. In our community engagement initiatives, we've hosted types of events to bring the community together. You know, sometimes when you're a new organization, you want to get your word out. You don't really know how to do it, so you do things to try to bring the community together. And so we've had several events, Sunday Fun Day. We've had a West Jackson Porch Fest. We've had West Jackson Gumbo. We've had Unification Beautification, where you come out and clean up your neighborhood or what have you. And so we've been successful in having some great things going on. But one of the things that I pride myself on is the community that I live in. And I live in West Jackson. I play in West Jackson. I work in West Jackson. And I moved here from Northwest Arkansas, which is a predominantly white area. It is flowing with resources, and my husband is from Jackson, so he felt like I held him hostage for 14 years, so he wanted to come home to Jackson, and so here we are. I can honestly say it's one of the best decisions he's ever made for our family. We've had an opportunity to purchase homes which leads me to our final initiative, which is the housing initiative. Since I've been working for CSE in the 4 years that I've been with them, we've put 28 houses, abandoned, blighted homes, back on the tax roll. We recruit local investors. We help them get the house either through the state or we match them up, because what we've done is we've cataloged every house in our area. And we know the owners. And if we don't know the owners, we research and we find them and we match them up, and those local investors call them, buy them and renovate them. And now we have JSU students living in them. We have young families. We have 3 teachers that have moved into the neighborhood. But yeah, we're just trying to build our community, because we know that we may not always get the help we need from someone else. And so if we can do it ourselves, we do what we can. So now I've told you a little bit about what we do from CSE's perspective. Now I want to talk to you guys from a homeowner, from a mother, from a woman, from a business owner, from a citizen's perspective. So when people say West Jackson to you, what do you think? Yeah?
That's where I grew up.
Yeah? So, but most people, when you hear West Jackson, they immediately think of crime, poverty, trash, dumping, mentally ill, lackluster schools, homelessness, blight, all of those things. I moved from an area, my husband moved me from a 3,500 square foot home to a 1,500 square foot home in Jackson. The difference is, I didn't own that home in Northwest Arkansas. That was the bank's home. That was their house, because if I don't pay my mortgage, guess who comes to get that house? But in Jackson, I was able to sell that house and buy 3 homes on one street, renovate those homes, and now I have a teacher living in that home. In one of them, I have college students. I have 4 college students living in my 5-bedroom home, and then I have a police officer living in a home. So we moved to another home right around the corner, a larger home, and I tried to finance this home. 3 banks turned me down. 3. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I moved from a 3,500 square foot home to a home in West Jackson. And so I started doing my research to figure out what's going on. Why can't I get a home? 3 banks turned me down. We finance our properties for our business. So what is going on? Well, I'll tell you, it's called redlining. And I'm sure you guys have heard the term before. When they can't find comps for the size of the home and the amount that is being purchased for. That's ridiculous. They want, I mean, the house, the appraiser told me that if I picked that same house up and moved it less than 5 miles away, that they could sell that house for 3 times as much as I wanted to purchase it for. That's ridiculous. Got to do something about the redlining. From a woman's perspective, I'm afraid to walk in my neighborhood. It didn't used to be like that 3 or 4 years ago, but now I'm afraid to walk in my neighborhood because of the crime rate. How many of you know that every time I call the police because of some gunfire, my insurance rates, they go up? I've been living in this home for about 2 years now, and my insurance rate has gone up twice. We got to do something about the homelessness. From a mother's perspective, the homelessness and the mentally ill, we have got to do something. It's a shame when you get caught on film dropping off a vagrant in somebody else's neighborhood, somebody else's backyard. It's a shame. When my kids can't go outside and play because homelessness have taken over the parks, it's a shame. Did you guys know that when Whitfield have patients that can no longer pay, an employee just brings them to the stew pot and drops them off at the corner? Probably don't know that, but because I live in the neighborhood, I see it all the time. Since COVID hit, I have seen more black, white, young, old, homeless people in my neighborhood walking up and down the street. It's not that they're breaking the law, it's just that where are we housing them? From an entrepreneur's perspective, the moratoriums were given to the renters for not to pay rent. But what about, I'm a mom and pop landlord. What about me? Because my mortgage company calling me and say, hey, you gotta pay this mortgage off, even if they're not paying rent. So what about us? I'm just asking. Then, from a citizen, state-owned properties that's owned by the state, we got to come up with a better system of people buying the properties, because what happens is we get people who will buy these properties and not do anything with them. So you may get them at a great rate, but when they set up for years and years and years and years, it's not doing anything for my property value when I'm right next door to a dilapidated house or a house that's not being used. So it has to be a system put in place where there's some rules and regulations when they purchase these properties. Like maybe you have to start working on it and you within 3 months, or you got to have somebody in the house in 6 months or a year, but you got to show some progress. There's a man on our street, no lie, he owns 11 state-owned properties that he got from the state. They've been like this for as long as I've been here, and that's 8 years. 11 on my street alone. My property values can't take it anymore. It's also the hedge fund, people who buy the houses from out of state. They don't really have any vested interest in the community, so they'll buy these houses and they'll let them sit as long as they get their benefit from it. And I just told you about the habitual home buyer. So, and then of course you have the absentee landlords. You gotta do something. All I ask is that you guys take what I've said to you into consideration and work on the laws to abate redlining, find housing for the homeless and the mentally ill, develop and implement a better system for local citizens to buy state-owned properties, and don't forget about moratoriums for mom and pop landlords. That's all I have.
Are there any questions of the committee members? Senator Norwood?
All right, regarding the property on Rose and Capitol,
Rose and Capitol, yes.
when would you all start working on that?
I'm hoping that we'll break ground. We're still fundraising. Duval Decker just gave us our site plans and everything, so we're hoping we can break ground mid next year, but that is kind of pushing it. But we're ready to move forward. As soon as like I said, we're raising money, and hopefully we'll be moving forward soon.
Is Jackson State, is Jackson Public School deeding the property to you all, or how's that?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Jackson Public School deeding the property to you all, or?
No, that's the thing. So one of the issues that we found out just today is that, the white building that's on the corner, the city of Jackson is, because this is the city's property, they're willing to tear down all of the other dilapidated buildings, but they want to preserve the white building. And so my funding source, or my funders are saying they don't want to build a multi-million-dollar building next to a dilapidated building. And so the city is saying that they're applying for a grant to, that will 80% of the grant will fund to restore the building. However, if you know what building I'm talking about, it's been like that for more than 25 years.
And I won't hold you up, I think, but
No,
that
go right
that
ahead.
is,
That's the purpose of this,
Yeah.
is to gather information.
But that is an issue, and I would like, you know, we probably can talk some offline, because I know when we've been on them about, they said they couldn't tear it down, they had to use for those purposes, and Jackson Public School and the city, between the two, they never would repair the building, and they just in such a state of disrepair now, they can't tear it down, they can't sell it, they can't do anything with it except that it's used for those purposes, because it was deeded to them from some individuals.
It was deeded to them from Viola Lake, and then they allowed JPS to use the facility, and it has to be used for educational purposes. And so we thought this would be a win-win, because the Youth Tech Center is going to be an education center. It's going to be, the community can use it, but it's primarily for young kids. And so I really wished I had brought the rendition so you guys could see it. The rendering is amazing. But because the city says they want to preserve that building, even though Duval Decker and other architects have said that that building will cost more than it's worth to to restore.
But if you I like, you know, because that's something that the community won't either redeveloped or gone one way or the other, so.
Well, is it okay if I contact you?
Sure.
Senator Witherspoon?
Ms. Shante.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
heard you talk about that it's 501c3.
Yes, ma'am.
You bought houses and how, you know, you renovated. How familiar is your 501c3 familiar with any of these housing grants?
I didn't know about all of those. I knew about the Teachers Fund, and I knew that because that's one of the ways we try to get our teachers to come into the area. But I didn't know about some of the other, can I get that info? Well, I'm sure I can go online and get it from,
You
yeah.
definitely can get your copy, because if we have extra, because I would love for you to have a copy. So, and that brings me to my next question. Do you think that you all will be applying for some of these grants?
We're a small organization, and so we've looked at some programs, and because we are so, because we are so small, we don't have the capability to do some of the things. But I will take it to my funders and see what they say. Yeah, we've tried to apply for some major grants, major federal grants, and we just don't have the capacity to do it.
But these are not necessarily large grant
Right.
monies with
Right.
the Mississippi Home Corps.
Okay.
So I would think you have the capacity.
We'll look at it and see.
Yeah, please do. You know, I always say, let them tell you no. Don't you assume no, let them tell you no.
Right.
I have a question. How long have you say you've been living in West Jackson for 4 years now?
I've been in West Jackson for 6 years.
6 years?
Yes.
And so over those years, you have been in a position to observe, and you believe that as a result of this pandemic, that young, old, black, white, they are homeless in the area?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, ma'am. In fact, one of those buildings I was talking about that's on the corner of Grand and Rose Street, right across that street is a church, and a man was killed. He's our neighbor, so he was killed and found on the steps of that church a couple of months ago. Yeah, so absolutely, and they're living in that building, the city-owned building. And like I said, we've been trying to get them to tear this building down for I don't know how long. But they have agreed to tear down that building and the Pied Piper building because it was burned, but they won't tear down the white Viola Lake property.
Any other questions of the committee members?
I just want to say how impressed I am, and I may be calling you, but just that you've put 28 blighted homes back on the tax market. That is incredible.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. I have really great people that I work with, and they, like I said, they either grew up in West Jackson, they work in West Jackson, they have family in West Jackson, so they love the place. And we use this as our proof of concept area, so if we can do this, we can replicate it somewhere else. So that's the plan.
That's what we're looking for, best practices.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Robbie Smith. Dr. Robbie Smith is not here.
I think he's out trying to clean up some properties right now.
What did you say, Senator Norwood? Oh. So you know him?
But I do think, Madam Chair, I do think that is especially in the city of Jackson, that state-owned property is a real problem in the city. And it's, a lot of people buy the property and hold the property, and especially in the Jackson State area, they're trying to hold it for Jackson State to expand, and Jackson State got a lot of those properties. We sold a lot of those properties and then put some back on the road, but that still is a real problem within that area.
But the whole purpose of what we're gathering is for each one of us, as we listen to all of this over the next 2 days, that we will craft legislation to present in the 2021 session. I believe is this Dr. Smith? Just in time, Dr. Smith. Well, actually, we are ahead of schedule, so we appreciate your coming, and go right up to the podium right there. Right over here. No, ma'am, to that podium right there. Dr. Robbie Smith is the Senior Planner, City of Jackson, Office of Housing and Community Development.
Yes,
Thank you, Doctor.
you're welcome. So I'm here today, I'm sorry, I'm just a little out of breath just now getting here. But I'm here today to talk about some of the issues that we face within the city of Jackson, and then as a member of the COC Continuum of Care for Central Mississippi, I've been the vice chair there with some things that we've noticed with homelessness. There are several things that we want to address, we would like to see addressed in housing. The city of Jackson, of course, you know, has received CARES Act money in the amount of $1,444,552, and additional sums of $500 and some odd dollars for that. That's for the CARES money. That's only can be used for COVID situations. Only if anyone's been lost their jobs, or that can't be used just yet because of the moratorium, as you're all aware. So the money's just sitting there. There's nothing that we can do right now. And we're seeing a lot of people calling in, and they're needing help with their rent, and they're losing their homes, and that types of thing. So there's a serious situation that that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And everything that we get from HUD is not enough to actually address the issues that we see in housing to really be effective. We're going to need state funding. We need some help from the state to help us move forward with getting some of these things done. With the homelessness issue with the COC, we had roughly, from the last pit count, and that's the point in time count from 2019, there was roughly 400 people that were unsheltered during that, on the coldest day that we picked out, which was January 27, 2019. And we want to see what we can do about getting more assistance for them. With the Continuum of Care is a group of organizations that provide supportive services for homeless individuals. They can get anything from food, they can get clothing. The Opportunity Center provides places where they can wash their clothes or take baths, but that's just one place, location. The Continuum of Care consists of 5 counties, which is Madison, Rankin, Copiah, Warren, and Hinds. But we know that the lion's share of all those homeless people is going to be right here in Jackson. And one of the biggest problems that we see with the homeless situation is that mental institutions or incarcerated facilities, when they have the returning citizens come, they're all just deposited right here in Jackson, and they're just on the streets. And because it causes a great problem for the city of Jackson, because we don't have all the necessary resources to house these individuals. We need state assistance. We are also developing, the city of Jackson is also developing homeless task force, and they're going to address, they're going to do outreach, but again, we're going to need assistance with more than what we got. What HUD gives us is nowhere nearly enough what we need to make a difference, a real difference. And the COC, of course, the Continuum of Care, as I mentioned earlier, it is funded by HUD, and everything has to be divvied up and spread around to those different nonprofit agencies that are members in the Continuum of Care. And other housing issues that we face here is home ownership. We don't have enough funding to help the low-income individual to become homeowners. And then when we do get some in, there are always situations, there are other barriers that they face. If they went to school and got this education to help them become more profitable and get into these better jobs, their student loans hinder them from moving forward. That is a major barrier. That is a major issue. And if you have a student loan, they're not even going to consider, if you get an FHA loan, you're not even going to be considered what Navient or whatever they're asking you to pay every month, even if it's forgiveness. They're going to take 1% of that balance. And that's going to be hard for anyone to overcome. So the new millennials and those kids that are coming out of school and want to start out and get on their own, it's cost prohibitive. They can't do it with the laws that are in place. So there are many things, many barriers and things that we see that are holding housing, period. There are a lot of things that need to be done. And we are going to need some state assistance. We're going to need some policy changes. We're going to need some things that are going to really address the real issues that we face. Okay?
Questions of committee members?
Any questions?
Senator Norwood?
I agree with the homeless challenge that's there. But I guess my concern is how well do you all coordinate with the other homeless providers, other individuals addressing homelessness through the continuum of care? Because, I mean, you know, it doesn't take much to just drive down Pascagoula or Pearl and see those guys
The gateway, yeah, the place.
laying out there on the street. And I just think that is a negative reflection on the city of Jackson, whether you have money or not. But that, you know, to drive down the street and see this, and this is every day, and through the continuum of care, through muting those guys, the money that you all, the grants that you get to give money to entities, somebody should be addressing that.
Absolutely, and the problem that you see, it's bigger than what you see, because it's so much that needs to be done. When you see those guys on that street at the Pascagoula Street and Gallatin right there, it's because in the daytime, places like the Billy Brumfield Mission and Gateway, they're closed. They can't go there. They can go to the Opportunity Center to do what they need to do, but all the transitional housing facilities are shut down for the daytime. You can't.
Now, I'm talking about next to the Clarence Ledger building. Those guys obviously sleep out there at night. I mean, early in the morning, they're laying out there on that sidewalk, and somebody told me they're laying there because air or heat come out through the vents that they're laying there on, right next to the Clarence Ledger building.
Yes. Unfortunately, we have some homeless individuals that will not be housed. They don't want to be housed, and we have to deal with that. And that's probably what you're seeing, or some that their mindset, or some of them have mental issues. You're not going to house them. They don't trust us enough to even come have conversations with them. It's a whole system that we have to go through as far as engaging them. And a lot of them want to be under the bridges. A lot of them want to be in their tent villages out in there. But there is a whole portion of that population that really needs assistance and are looking for it, and it's just not available to them. But there are some that just really, that's where they want to be. And we can't force them, to accept housing. We cannot force them. According to the McKinney-Vento laws, we can't force them. We just have to offer it to them.
Let me ask you a question then. If I'm laying out there on the street, I'm not homeless, but I'm just laying out there on the street, what would you do to me?
We have, within this continuum of care, we have different agencies that address issues like that. We have an ACT team. It was done through the Hines Behavioral Health or Comprehensive Health. They will come out and actively engage with you and try to get you off the street. Again, they won't force you, but they do have the resources to help get you someplace. And then within our coordinated entry system, your name and your information is put through the system, and whoever has the help for your specific need, they're going to be contacted, and that's where that person will be taken to see what else can be done with the wraparound services and all the supportive services that we do have in the continuum of care.
I mean, and that's because we met with Dr. in mental health. They have resources that they told us that, they have resources that would, that they could make available, or they have a relationship with the city of Jackson that's supposed to be addressing individuals with mental, that have mental challenges. If a person has a mental challenge that's living on the street, we could not get that person, committed to the state hospital.
Right. You can't, you can take them, I think St. Dominic's, they do take them to St. Dominic's to that, to the ward there that they have. But again, funding is a real issue with being able to assist those people in those instances. But more often than not, what you're seeing is someone that's come from the mental institution that's been deposited in that area. And therefore, once whatever funding ran out there, whatever mental asylum or whatever, I don't want to use that word, but whatever the institution was they were in, that's where they deposit. And the reason being, because they're supposed to be discharged in an area where there are resources. However, with we're just inundated with so many, and the resources are so limited that we cannot take care of everybody. And again, not everybody wants to be assisted.
Have you all done an assessment to determine what needs may be there and what costs what cost it would be to address the homeless situation that we have here?
Have we done an assessment to see what we need for the homeless?
And the costs?
The cost needs. I cannot say that that's been done. I'm not aware of a study been done on that depth, but we collect data, and those data are put into the HUD system, and therefore that's when those analyses are issued to HUD, and so they see exactly what's going on. That's why it's very important when we do go out into the neighborhoods and we see these homeless people there, that we get their name. We try to get as much information that we can on each one of them, what their situations are. Again, a lot of them don't want to talk to us. A lot of, they're just not trustful of everybody. So we get what data that we can, and that's submitted into the HMIS system. And again, it's recorded to HUD, and those reports are sent in so that they see what we're facing. That's why it's very important that we get those numbers in. But if, the numbers have to support the funding, so if that answers your question, I do to the best of my abilities anyway. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Witherspoon?
Yes, ma'am. I think you used the word deposit into the community. You used the word deposit. And the young lady before you said that the Mississippi State Hospital, Whitfield, was dropping people off
Yes.
in the community.
Yes.
So you are familiar with that? Okay, so you stated that the law is, that states that as long as you drop a person off where there is resources,
Right.
whose law is that? Because that may be something we need to change. Is that a Mississippi law? Is that long as there are resources, a person with mental illness can be dropped off from the state hospital
And that's exactly
in a
what they do.
community? So no one has to take this person. They could just drop them off.
They can drop them off. Sometimes the police, the law enforcement agency, they will try to intervene and try to do what they can to help, but all they can do, again, is contact the COC or whatever service providers that they know to try and see if there is assistance available. And unfortunately, they run out of assistance, they run out of beds,
Right.
there's just nothing, it's not a whole lot that can be done until something changes.
Wow, so they're just able to
They're
drop
deposited,
a
yes.
person from Whitfield
Yes.
in a community where there are resources.
And a lot of people don't know if they're harmful. We don't know what's going on with them, where their mental capacities are.
Right.
So,
Are they stable? Right.
Something needs to be done about that.
Yes, I
Absolutely.
agree.
I just want a clarification. Now, are you saying dropping them off at a homeless shelter or someplace? Are you saying on the street?
They've dropped them off on the street. Sometimes they will drop them near a shelter, but they're deposited into an area. Mhm.
All right, and my other question is related to your talking about the kids getting out of college with the student
Yes.
loans, and it's cost prohibitive for them for home ownership. Now, how can that be addressed? Okay, if they don't have you say 1% of it has to go to
Yes.
the student loan.
1%, and I know you understand exactly what that, we're talking about, we said 1% of the student loan amount. those student loans can be astronomical.
Oh,
you
I
know.
understand
They're very high. So if you're trying to get an FHA loan and your debt-to-income ratio is, it would be fine if they would count what you actually pay. Say if you get a income-driven note and it's like you pay $50 a month. They're not going to use that $50 when you go to the lender. They're going to use whatever the total amount. Say you have $180,000 in debt, student loan debt, which a lot of us do. They're going to count $1,800 rather than your $50. So that's going to be a huge barrier in trying to get a loan to afford a house. And then the mindset now seems to be geared towards renting, but we all know that homeownership is a wealth-building tool. And we need that in order to empower our people. I mean, even as you grow older, you may need money to pull equity out for health care or whatever, but if you're renting, you're just paying the landlord's mortgage. You're not getting anything out of it yourself. So.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask Ethan. Ethan, are you familiar with the law she just stated? Okay. Okay. All right.
And can I just share on there as well?
Yes, sir.
Now, we talked to Dr. McHugh with mental health, and that is not supposed to be taking place.
I'm so sorry.
About the state hospital and other entities dropping, that is not supposed to be taking place. And her advice to us was that if you're aware of that happening, contact her office. She is
Who is she?
She's the director of executive director of mental health.
Now, we do have some within the city, this continuum of care that's working with those facilities for discharge procedure, that we're trying to get that together. But as long as I've been in the continuum of care for the last 4 years, that's not happened just yet. So it's a lot of intricacies that they have to work out to get that, with all of them working
She
together.
explicitly stated that should not be happening, and if we're aware of that happening, we need to contact her office. They're not supposed to be doing, they cannot just drop an individual off. It's just like when a person can't be released from Department of Correction without an address.
Yes.
They're not supposed to be dropping individuals off on the street or anywhere else
Absolutely.
that's not known to them. So, and we can follow back up with her on that, but she told us that, explicitly, and
follow up on that. I don't think there would be a law that would authorize that behavior, but it certainly sounds like it's something that needs to be tightened up.
Senator Boyd.
Do we know for certain, though, that is either happening from the Department of Mental Health or Department of Corrections, or could it be outside other places that are bringing them? I mean, do we know for certain that it is those two particular entities?
It's anywhere. I mean, I'm just not saying any place right here in
No,
Jackson.
I mean, I'm saying, though, do we have conclusive evidence? And I'm asking this on purpose. I want to make sure that we are not
Right.
despairing anybody. That do we have conclusive proof that the state, which would be the Department of Mental Health or the Department of Corrections, is actually doing that? Or is there just maybe rumor that there is? Could it also be outside entities that are not the state organizations? I want to be very clear, because this is a very serious allegation that's
Absolutely,
been
absolutely.
alleged. So
Yeah.
do you have conclusive proof of that?
I don't have conclusive,
Okay.
no, I don't have conclusive proof of that. Mhm.
Okay, I just want to be
Yes.
very clear on
I do
that. So,
understand. Mhm.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Dr. Smith,
Appreciate it.
that's our last presenter for today. Tomorrow morning, we'll begin at 9 a.m. We'll have Steve Nell with Intravest Corporation. At 9:30, Megan Elder, who's the Associate Executive for the Mississippi Apartment Association and Mississippi Association of Affordable Housing Providers. At 10 a.m., Ed Sivak, the Executive Vice President of Policy and Communications for Hope Credit Union. And 10:30, Will Bedwell, the Staff Attorney for Mississippi Center for Justice. So we should be out of here by 11 a.m. tomorrow.
If we'll get here in time.
That's correct. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Do we need to sign sheets? Okay.